My name is Victoria Salmons. I'm 27 years old. For the last 5 years, I've built a career in marketing, late nights, endless coffee campaigns that nobody but the client ever remembered. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Or at least I thought it was. 3 weeks ago, everything unraveled. My entire department was cut during restructuring. One moment I was brainstorming slogans. The next, my manager was handing me a severance envelope with an apologetic smile. The shock felt like standing on a trap door. But what hurt more wasn't the job loss, it was what came after. Brandon, my boyfriend, 25, 2 years together. We'd talked about moving in, even hinted at getting engaged next year. I had savings, a plan, and love. I thought that was enough. So the very first thing I did when I got home was call him. My hands were shaking. I just needed to hear his voice to know I wasn't alone in this. "Hey, I got laid off today," I whispered, fighting the lump in my throat. There was a pause. "No, are you okay?" "No, I'm so sorry, babe. Just one flat question." "So, what about rent?" The silence after that split me open. I told him I had savings, that unemployment would kick in soon, and I'd already applied to jobs. He went quiet, then said we should meet at his place that evening. I thought maybe he wanted to comfort me face to face. When I arrived, he was already waiting. Full designer outfit cologne, sharp in the air, the same suit I'd bought him for his birthday. His expression was managerial, cold, like he was about to fire me too. "Victoria," he said, folding his hands. "I need to be real with you. I don't date broke girls. This isn't working for me." I laughed, a hollow, shocked sound, waiting for the punchline. But his face stayed rigid. "I have standards. I need a woman who can provide for herself, someone ambitious. You losing your job shows me you're not that girl. Level up or I'm gone." He even mimed the nail polish emoji with his hand. Out loud, like a parody of himself. "Are you serious?" I whispered. My chest tightened. 2 years, and he was ending it because of something that happened 8 hours ago. It's not just the job, it's what it represents. "You're comfortable with average. I can't live like that." The words sliced through me. Comfortable with average. In that moment, I remembered my grandmother, the woman who raised me after my parents died. She used to say, "When someone shows you who they are, Mija, believe them." I had never wanted to believe it less. Still, I heard my own voice steadier than I felt saying, "Then I guess you're gone." I walked out, heart-pounding tears burning my eyes but refusing to fall. I left behind 2 years of dinners. I paid for 2 years of him, borrowing my credit card, 2 years of shrinking myself to fit his vision. What he didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away. Along with the grief, she left me her house and some savings. After taxes and selling the property, it came to about $275,000. I hadn't told Brandon. I wanted to be smart to plan. I wanted to build a future with that money, invest wisely, maybe buy a home we could share. But sitting in his living room hearing him call me average, I knew the truth. That inheritance would never be for him. That night I slept on my friend's couch staring at the ceiling. My world had collapsed in less than 24 hours. Yet beneath the devastation, something else stirred. Not rage, not despair. Resolve. Because if Brandon thought he'd broken me, he had no idea who I really was. The days after the breakup blurred together. Grief and relief swirled in me like oil and water. I kept replaying Brandon's words, "I don't date broke girls," over and over like an unwanted chorus. 2 years of dinners I paid for, vacations I saved toward, while he lounged at his father's office pretending to network. 2 years of listening to him compare me to his friends' girlfriends. They get surprise jewelry, trips to Bali. Why can't you be more like them? Now I had my answer. Because I wasn't disposable. Because I wasn't going to audition for his approval anymore. Then came the call I had been dreading and hoping for all at once, the estate lawyer. My grandmother's affairs had finally been settled. The number was precise. After taxes, after selling her little house, $275,000. I sat there staring at the paper, my chest tight. That number wasn't just money. It was every sacrifice she made, raising me after my parents died. It was safety, possibility, freedom. And in a cruel twist, it arrived just as Brandon walked out of my life. I could hear her voice in my head. "Use it wisely, Mija. Don't let anyone leech off you." For a while, I planned to just invest it quietly, keep living frugally. But after a week of crying on my friend's couch, I made a different choice. Not reckless, just defiant. I found a penthouse apartment downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of view that makes you forget your own name at sunset. Expensive, yes. But I didn't splurge for Brandon or to impress anyone. I did it for me, for my grandmother, for the girl who'd been told she was average. The night I moved in, I stood barefoot in that living room, lights off city skyline stretching endlessly below me. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. I took one photo, just the view, posted it on Instagram with the caption, "New Chapter." Within minutes, my phone buzzed nonstop. My best friend Marisol, "Holy hell, is this your place?" A coworker I hadn't spoken to in months, "Girl, this view is insane." And then an unknown number. "Hey, I miss us. Can we talk?" I froze, then laughed. Out loud, bitter and sharp. Brandon. Of course. The same man who dumped me 8 hours after I lost my job was now crawling back the second he thought I'd leveled up. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot. Sent it to Marisol with nothing but the cry-laughing emoji. For the first time since the layoff, I felt something lighter than grief. Not joy, not yet, but satisfaction. Because Brandon had just reminded me of something important. He hadn't left because I was broke. He left because his love was conditional. And now, he was about to learn what happens when you try to crawl back into a life you already threw away. Brandon didn't take silence well. The texts kept coming, first soft, sugar sweet. "I made a mistake, baby. I was scared. I only said those things because I didn't want to lose you. We can work through this, can't we?" Then guilt-ridden, ignoring me as immature. "You know you still love me. My therapist says you're avoiding conflict resolution." I almost laughed at that one. Brandon, who couldn't sit through a serious conversation without turning it into a performance, suddenly had a therapist. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on rebuilding myself. Job interviews, morning workouts, cooking instead of takeout. For the first time in years, my days felt like mine again. But Brandon wasn't done. One Thursday, I sat at a cafe, laptop open, fine-tuning my resume. The door chimed and in walked Brandon. Not alone. With him, his cousin, 2 friends, all voices deliberately loud as they accidentally chose the table right beside me. "Girl, you deserve so much better," one of them said. Her tone pitched, just enough to carry. "Yeah, he was lucky to have you," another chimed. I slipped on my headphones, volume high, but their words cut through anyway. Finally, Brandon himself leaned toward me, eyes wide, face softened, into that rehearsed tenderness I used to fall for. "Victoria, can we please just talk like adults?" I slid my headphones down and looked him dead in the eye. "We did talk. You said you don't date broke girls. I was broke, remember embarrassing." His jaw tightened. "I didn't mean it like that." "You literally said those exact words. People were watching." He hated that. His friends fidgeted, pretending to sip coffee. I closed my laptop and shouldered my bag. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice rising with desperation. "Somewhere you're not," I said simply. I walked out, his eyes burning into my back. That night, his messages turned frantic. Then a series of Instagram stories. "When you realize what you lost, a real man admits his mistakes." Selfies of him crying, mascara somehow perfectly intact. I shook my head, pathetic. But the real spectacle came Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee by the window when my building's doorman Rico called. "Ms. Salmons, there's a young man downstairs insisting he's your boyfriend. Wants to be let up." My stomach dropped. "No, he's not. Please don't." I peeked from my window, just in time to see Brandon being escorted out by security. He shouted up toward the glass theatrics on full blast. "She's holding me hostage emotionally." I let the curtain fall. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from clarity. Brandon wasn't chasing me out of love. He was chasing control. And he was just getting started. By the next week, the circus expanded. Brandon wasn't just trying to get my attention anymore, he was recruiting others to fight his battle for him. It started with a phone call I didn't expect. A deep, unfamiliar voice, "Victoria. This is Mr. Walker, Brandon's father. We need to talk." I froze. In 2 years of dating, Brandon, his father, had spoken maybe 10 words to me. Now he sounded stern, like a disappointed principal. "What's going on with you and my son?" "He's devastated. Says you cut him off, won't even let him explain." I tightened my grip on the phone. "With respect, Mr. Walker. Brandon dumped me the day I lost my job. Said he doesn't date broke girls. That was his choice." Silence. Then he lowered his voice. "Come on. He told us you're doing well now. You could give him another chance. Don't throw away your future over pride." I almost laughed. Pride. "Sir, the penthouse isn't from a new job. It's from my grandmother's inheritance, something Brandon would know if he'd bothered to ask how I was doing, instead of humiliating me." Dead air, then a muttered inheritance before he hung up. That was when I realized Brandon wasn't just obsessed, he was rewriting the story. The proof came 2 days later on LinkedIn, of all places. A notification pinged Brandon Walker tagged you in a post. My heart sank as I opened it. A long, flowery essay, proud of my ex-girlfriend, Victoria, for overcoming job loss and finding success. Real love means supporting each other through transformations. Underneath, dozens of comments tearing him apart. This isn't Facebook, sir. Why are you tagging her? Yikes. He deleted it within hours, but screenshots spread like wildfire. Then came TikTok. Brandon filming himself, eyes red, talking about how he was financially abused by a narcissist who hid her wealth to manipulate him. His comments filled with strangers dragging him. Bro, didn't you say you dumped her? I thought it couldn't get worse. Until my bank called. Ms. Salmons, we flagged an attempt to add a new authorized user to your credit card. The name submitted was Brandon Walker. My pulse pounded. He still had my personal information from when we'd talked about getting an apartment together. He'd actually tried to attach himself to my accounts. I filed a fraud report immediately. At the police station, I handed over screenshots, bank alerts, everything. My hands shook as I signed the forms, not from fear, but rage. Still, Brandon wasn't finished. Hours later, my phone buzzed with screenshots from my old coworker, Derek. Brandon had launched a GoFundMe. The title helped me rebuild after financial betrayal. Goal, $50,000. The description was a masterpiece of delusion. She promised me a future, then hid assets to discard me. I need therapy time to heal and resources to start over. He'd raised $73, probably from his mother. I stared at the screen, speechless. This wasn't love anymore. This was a campaign. A war he was waging in public. And if I didn't protect myself soon, he was going to burn my name to the ground, just to drag me back into his. The GoFundMe would have been laughable if it wasn't so pathetic. But Brandon wasn't laughing anymore. He was escalating. By Friday afternoon, a knock came at my penthouse door. Not flowers, not an apology. A process server. Victoria Salmons, he asked, holding out a packet thick with paper. Yes, you've been served. My heart plummeted as I flipped through the pages. Brandon was suing me. The claims were absurd. Emotional distress. Promissory estoppel, basically saying I promised to marry him, and he rearranged his life based on that. Unjust enrichment. His words, I hid my inheritance, therefore I defrauded him out of a shared future. He wanted $100,000 in damages. I sat on the couch, stunned. He had dumped me, humiliated me, and now he wanted money on top of it. I called my cousin Mateo, who happened to be a lawyer. He skimmed the documents, then let out a dry laugh. This is the legal equivalent of a tantrum. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Honestly, this is going to be fun to destroy in court. But Brandon wasn't content to wait for court. He wanted to suffocate me in the meantime. Suddenly, he was everywhere. At my gym at 6 a.m, Brandon, who used to sleep till 10, panting dramatically on the treadmill next to mine, moaning about lost love. At the Saturday farmers market where I buy fresh flowers, him trailing behind me, loudly telling vendors I'd abandoned him like some tragic rom-com gone rancid. Even at my salon, I walked in for a haircut only to find him parked outside in his car windows down, blasting our song on repeat. Each performance was louder, stranger, more desperate. The last straw was the barbershop incident. My barber, Big Mike, called me outside. Brandon was sitting in his car again, shouting accusations through the window. She's in there talking trash about me. Mike, 6'5" and not a man you mess with, leaned down to the car. Move along before I call the cops. Brandon peeled out tires, screeching. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, I gathered every piece of evidence I had, the fraudulent bank attempt, screenshots of the GoFundMe, the LinkedIn humiliation, the TikToks, the texts, and witness accounts from Rico, the doorman, Big Mike, even fellow gym members who'd complained. On Monday morning, I walked into the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. The judge didn't hesitate. A temporary protection order was granted immediately. Brandon was to be served within 24 hours. I thought maybe this would slow him down. But when Brandon realized the law was now between us, he didn't back off. He exploded. That night, my phone lit up with notifications. He'd unleashed a 10-part Instagram story series, screenshots of our old texts cropped to make me look cruel. Photos of us smiling captioned, "She abandoned me." A picture of a pregnancy test negative but implying he'd been discarded while she was pregnant. Even an image of the restraining order with the words, "This is what narcissists do," scrawled over it. Finally, he went live, crying, hyperventilating, claiming I was using the system to silence his truth. He announced he was starting a support group for women financially manipulated by men. His own friends commented, "Bree, this is too much. Dude, log off." Even his ride-or-die cousin called me. "We need to talk." The live ended abruptly. Someone's voice in the background shouting, "Brandon, enough. You're embarrassing yourself." It was his father. The next morning, his lawyer withdrew from the case. Even they saw the madness. But I knew this wasn't the end. Because people like Brandon don't stop when they're caught. They double down. The courthouse smelled like old paper and nerves. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my cousin Mateo beside me, folders neatly stacked. My palms were cold, but my spine was straight. Brandon strutted in like he owned the place. Designer suit, slicked back hair, even a cameraman trailing behind him until the bailiff barked, "No cameras in court." He frowned, whispered something to his lawyer, a fresh face I didn't recognize, probably the only one desperate enough to take his case. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My pulse quickened. This was it. Brandon's lawyer opened with a performance worthy of an audition, Your Honor. My client. Brandon Walker was emotionally manipulated. Ms. Salmons orchestrated a scheme hiding her inheritance, faking financial hardship, all to test his loyalty. She misrepresented herself, causing severe distress and lost future earnings. I nearly choked. Future earnings. As if Brandon had ever earned anything. Mateo stood calmly. Your Honor. The evidence will show the opposite. My client lost her job through no fault of her own. Mr. Walker dumped her within hours, citing her unemployment as embarrassing. Only when he saw her living situation improve did he return and escalate into harassment, fraud, and defamation. The judge nodded, expression unreadable. Proceed. Mateo laid out the evidence one by one. My termination letter proving the layoff. My grandmother's death certificate and estate documents showing the inheritance came after the breakup. Screenshots of Brandon's own texts, "I don't date broke girls." Records of his fraudulent attempt to add himself to my credit card. Witness statements from Rico, the doorman. Big Mike gym members. And finally, the pièce de résistance, Brandon's social media circus. The TikToks, the GoFundMe, the LinkedIn stunt, even his fake pregnancy test post. When the judge asked for clarification, Mateo dropped the hammer. Your Honor, we subpoenaed medical records. Not only was Mr. Walker never pregnant, he purchased that test image from a stock photo website. The courtroom gasped. Brandon's lawyer sputtered. Objection, but the judge overruled. The judge leaned forward, pinning Brandon with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. Mr. Walker, did you seriously claim this woman's deceased grandmother was fictional? Brandon's bravado cracked. His face crumpled into practiced tears. I was hurt. She lied to me. What lie the judge pressed? What did she lie about? She didn't tell me about the money, Brandon stammered. Money she didn't yet have when you ended the relationship. Money you were not entitled to. Am I correct? Brandon just sobbed harder. His lawyer buried his face in his notes. The judge sighed, exasperated. This court is not a stage for theatrics. Mr. Walker, you brought frivolous claims, wasted judicial resources, and defamed this woman publicly. Case dismissed with prejudice. Relief rushed through me, but the judge wasn't finished. As for the countersuit, his voice sharpened. Judgment in favor of Ms. Salmons, $50,000 in damages, $15,000 in legal fees, and a permanent restraining order. Mr. Walker, you will remain at least 500 feet away from Ms. Salmons, her home and workplace. Any violation will result in jail time. The gavel struck. Final. Brandon's father tried to approach me outside, muttering something about settling privately. Mateo stepped between us. Send the check to my office. Any contact is a violation of the order. Mr. Walker's shoulders slumped as he turned away. For the first time in months, I exhaled. It was over, or at least the court chapter was, because life has a way of delivering karma with interest. The first check arrived 2 weeks later. $50,000 in damages, $15,000 for legal fees. Brandon's signature trembling on the line. I deposited it with steady hands, not because I needed the money, but because it was proof his lies couldn't erase my truth. News spread fast. Screenshots of the trial documents leaked online. Brandon's carefully curated image, the charming, misunderstood boyfriend, collapsed overnight. His friends distanced themselves. Even his cousins stopped defending him. The final blow came from within his own home. Brandon had worked part-time at his father's real estate firm. But after the courtroom spectacle, business partners started pulling out. No one wanted to be associated with a man suing his ex-girlfriend over imaginary money. To salvage the company, his father fired him. Brandon, the man who dumped me for being broke, was unemployed, living with his parents, selling designer sneakers on resale apps to scrape by. Meanwhile, my life was beginning again. I started a new job, better than the one I'd lost, with a 20% raise. On my first day, I treated myself to take-out pad thai and ate barefoot in my penthouse city lights stretching out like a promise. I met someone, too. A neighbor in the building, Daniel, a young surgeon. Our first date, he insisted on paying. When I offered to split, he smiled and said, "Equality is attractive. Next one's yours. No drama, no conditions, just kindness." One evening, sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine, I thought of my grandmother. Her voice felt close, almost tangible in the warm night air. Money doesn't change people, mija. It reveals them. She was right. Brandon's cruelty, his greed, his desperation, none of it was created by my inheritance. It was simply exposed by it. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze wash over me, and whispered into the night, "Thank you, abuela, for everything." Across town, I knew Brandon was probably still spiraling, plotting his next pity post, searching for someone else to drain. But he no longer haunted me. Because the truth was simple, he had shown me who he was, and I had finally believed him. Victoria's story wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about freedom. The freedom to walk away from conditional love. The freedom to choose peace over chaos. The freedom to build a life without apologies for not being enough or for being too much. Brandon had lost everything chasing money he thought defined worth. I had gained everything by realizing